Good afternoon. This is Mike Harris. Today's date is August 19th, 2021. And today we have as our guest a dear friend and colleague who I have come to have a great deal of respect and admiration for a number of reasons. And one of them is he's one of the few guys who I've met who thinks faster than I do. And I have a hard time keeping up from time to time, and he's very modest about it, but I have to beat his drum. But let me welcome the esteemed Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Rick, how are you, sir?
Thank you, Michael. I'm going bald. Unnatural causes. I pulled it out. My girlfriend took my ponytail off that I had for 40 years, and she made a voodoo doll out of it.
Well, it's time that you modernized your look. The 60s have been working for a long time. And aging men with bald heads and ponytails is not not the happening.
I'm happy, man. I remember running with Ken and Frank Kesey in the old Magic Bus down out of San Francisco. The bikers, when Tom Wolfe wrote Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, I'm that physicist that had all the martial arts. What just happened? Oh, there it is. Let me, I've got so many things loaded, they keep popping up on me all the time. I remember going back into the early years when the coast of Oregon was just, it's different now. Everything is different, isn't it?
Well, those are some of the things I want to talk to you about, because we are going through some very different changes on this planet. Oh. But first, the primary reason for having you on here is you've been writing a new book. You've got the content is finished. You're in the process of indexing it and getting ready for publication. But I wanted to kind of pre-sell it a little bit and get people interested in what the topics are. So why don't you give us a brief overview of what the book is about, and we can talk about what you've got coming to print here very soon.
So in 1970, my mentor, Dr. Stanley Krippner, invited me to New York.
Met, by the way.
Who? I'm sorry, sir?
I've met Stanley, by the way. I've had him as a guest on the video.
He's still alive. He's down in Carmel.
I know.
Yeah, I've dedicated this non-local mind to his work. He's been my friend for 51 years. He purposely invited me there. I had done a paper on Karelian photography, and so he had Simon Karelian and Victor Rajek and a couple of other Russians that were there presenting in eventually a book that Gordon and Breach put out called Energies of Consciousness. And that was 1970. And the purpose was for me to be at Mission Control in 1971 to do the ESP studies with NASA, with Edgar Mitchell. And that book, the ESP induction through forms of self-hypnosis, formed the foundation for when I started working for SEAL Corporation out of Amherst. Navy SEALs had not existed yet. It was still a Blackwater operation out of Amherst. And I did the studies of, and I'm going to do a book called The SEAL Reports. There's 12 reports over a 2.5-year period where I ended up developing a series of protocols on what to find a Navy SEAL. And SEAL Team 1, there were only 8 of us, and it turns out all 8 of us are still standing. Albeit we're all in titanium and limbs, of artificial limbs, and make a lot of noise when we walk in through rooms. But all SEAL Team 1 is still alive. SEAL Team 2 took a couple of hits, 3. I trained several of those in Cambodia. And then in 72, that's when we did that's when I wrote the holographic concept of reality. And that took me to Prague. That year, Gabor had gotten a Nobel Prize. I had met him working under old man DuPont when I was working at the Experimental Research Station in Wilmington. I was walking down the hall, and I looked in this room, and here is a three-dimensional color TV. And that was 1967. Where is that in our market programs? We don't have that, and yet there was when I saw it. And that's what led me to write the holographic concept, which got him a Nobel Prize. What happened is in 73, I then wrote the embryonic holography, which was an add-on, and presented both of that and the first AI demonstration at Claremont, at Sonoma, excuse me, not Claremont. That was a different event. And 1 week later, 4 gentlemen came into my bookstore, 2 in uniform, placed me under close arrest and went through my files. And all my work on holographic concepts was classified top secret, and for 20 years. And it came out, the embryonic came out in 92 in Psychedelic Monographs and Essays, and 2 Russian scientists quoted from that paper and were nominated for a Nobel Prize. They didn't get the nod, which means I didn't get to go to Stockholm, but Max Rempel, a second-generation Russian working under Guriev, quoted from my work last year on a major breakthrough he did on the proton cloud. Now, the proton, it's a biological thing where the proton cloud is that space between when a proton is a particle and when it becomes a wave. And that's where the multiverse lies. And he came up to interview me, and he was saying, we have a problem with Schrodinger's cat. We're not sure what to do. And that's when I suggested, whoa, you mean the best little whorehouse in Texas? And bang, realized that I had the mathematics to take his work where he has now proved that neurotransmitters are resonant cavity oscillators like you find in your gut, and that the brain is basically a second gut dialoguing with subtle bodies outside the physical body. Things like what you would call chi, where you have microtubules with structured water in it. Now,
you just touched on an interesting point about the gut, because people don't realize, as far as neurotransmitters, that the gut is really the source of serotonin in your body. It's not the mind.
It's the source of everything.
It's the gut.
Yeah, well, it's the gut of Earth. Gaia is the mycorrhiza, and the mycelium in Earth is the electrical system, like we have the nervous system in our body, as a metaphor. Now, it's important that you understand the limitation even I have in conceptualization. And one of the things that I make in this new book I have out, which sequels the power tool, there was ESP, that work I did, that was thinking with the gut. Then I wrote power tools for the 21st century, which were the 8 protocols, including the ESP, that I trained Navy SEALs in, that made them so-called super soldiers. They didn't use that term back then, but that's what they were. They next level up besides AI. And the non-local mind completes this series where chapter 5, for example, is called Synchronicity, where nothing happens by chance. And chapter 8 is the mind's eye, where imagination is reality. Anything, we're in, as a metaphor, we are in a shared dream, and death is waking up. And in the book, I talk about what happens at the moment of, and the moment just after death with consciousness. And at the moment of death, there's a 5-gram weight loss in everyone, and it's not urine. What is it? And I am proposing that Hammeroff, and before him, the work we did at the UW, it's microtubules with 5 grams of structured water. And as a metaphor, 5 grams of structured water, H3O2, is enough memory for more than 100,000 lifetimes. And that's why they say we're in a matrix, we're hanging, because time isn't real. Now, space, and why we went from quantum mechanics, is that I was present in 71, and I did the studies of Prague on what we call cosmobiology. I watched astrology become astronomy, and the next move will be cosmobiology, or what you call biorhythms. And the one that was primary was Janev's work out of Yugoslavia, where he showed that when the woman is born on Earth, there is an engram on when she ovulates with the phase of the moon, Earth, and the sun. And if she moves to a different part of the Earth, that phase angle changes, which means her ovulation cycle changes, and they were using that as birth control. And that became cosmobiology. Now, the work I did was with the Department of Interior out of Menlo Park. The study suggested that when Uranus is in a specific alignment with Earth and the Sun, there was a 3 sigma error coefficient of an event of major earthquake that even today, suspicious observer, they don't even get it. Now, in astrology, Uranus is a higher octave of Earth. And in astronomy, it's some planet so far away that there are no known laws on how it can affect anything on Earth. And yet what I did is I used the 360 and went back through history and proved that it was 3 sigma, that when Uranus and the Earth and the Sun are in a specific alignment, there will be a major event of an 8.4 beyond where continental shifts occur. And that included Carrington event. All of the different ones that were like that have to do with Uranus and why space is not really real. The argument I have used recently in the book is physics starts with assumed truths. If you assume that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, the Earth's round. But if space is curved with event horizons, precursor waves, solid-state physics, I can prove with tensor math the Earth's flat. Which one is it? And the correct answer is yes, because that's how limited our concept of space is as a human being. There are literally 4 cetaceans on this planet that I've identified that have higher technologies than man. One of them was the work I did with Carl Sagan in 72. He took me into John Lilly's labs. These idiots thought they were going to use the dolphin as a weapon, like our man Flint, that guide, torpedoes into their target. And they wanted to have a breakthrough on the language. They talked to the dolphin. And I was there maybe 10 days, and I came out and I was blown away. Their language was a form of Clifford algebra, dimensional math. They had a redundancy coefficient that was like 10 times more efficient than Old Hebrew, which is, the gematria and the Bible with Sefer Yetzirah. Now, with that said, I said, their language is unbelievable. I was wrong. Less than 6 months ago, they just proved that dolphins do not have a language. They're sending pictures.
They're what now?
They're sending pictures, holograms.
Pictures. Okay.
Yeah, they don't even use language. They blurb, and a hologram is created of the thing. And even with me proposing that, before I even went in to study the dolphin, I didn't even get it. Mm-hmm. I do now, and realizing how limited we are. Another argument I might use with you to show you our limitation is, what we notice is, how many ants are on your property? And who's terrifying them?
I couldn't even begin to guess. More than I'm aware of.
And if you look below your house, who's terraforming that earth more? Hive consciousness. Man believes we're the center of everything, and we don't even get it. We're just part of the food chain. And I watched dolphin being chased by orca as food chain. And orca has a cerebral cortex literally twice the size of man. And that mammal is firing 60% of it. It is able to go to 9/10 of our biosphere, where man can only go to 1/10. Who's superior? It's your belief systems are tools. They're not real. They're like, you choose a belief to actualize what you want to do and where you want to go. And if it doesn't fit, you change it, and now the Earth's flat, and you have those doors to open as opposed to the ones where it's round.
Well, that's what you always said, is if you want to change reality, change the movie you're watching.
There you go. That's exactly correct.
You've been saying to me for the last 10 years.
And it's important to realize that our five, and actually there are more senses going on. Dogs, for example, can determine your mood by odoriferous molecules, scent. And that's one of the few places where the brain is actually connected to the physical world through, odoriferous molecules. Now, sweat glands and, that kind of thing. I had this hot flash back in 1970 that maybe we could ionize these things and tell internal state functions without having to be invasive. That led to Carillion photography, which doesn't work, but David Donaldson, one of my professors at did in Antarctica with bioluminescence and created the first MRI out of Washington State University. And that's where it all came from, my early work on Carillion photography. And so now I'm starting to realize some of the work I did, I didn't even think about it back then, and yet it's having a massive effect on everything. And so I started to take a closer look at what I really am, and I'm not any superior than you are, man. I'm in just as much deep shit as anybody else in terms of I can't control anything, and there's something else going on. And because of my single visit to Groom Lake, I think we've been invaded, and we're like a petri dish. Because if time isn't real, what is an epoch?
Why don't you expand on that a little bit? Why don't you give us how you came to that conclusion? What led you to believe that?
I've been writing algorithms for AI since 72. Not 82, 92. I've been doing it for more than 50 years. I can spot algorithms from Abbotsford, the D-Wave stuff. I can spot that stuff because most of it's still pretty primitive. Mm-hmm. But when you can see through that, there's something else going on here. And it would be like God. Now, if you study the Bible, as I have, from a Hermetic Kabbalist point of view, I studied with Gershom Scholem for like 6 years. And I had to learn Old Hebrew and Greek and became a Hermetic Kabbalist. And they talk about several gods in the Bible. There's Yahweh, the creator, right? And then there's his boss, Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh. Now, they're not the same. And the Roman Church, the Roman Church departed the teachings of Christ in the year 1000 with Pope Innocent I when they declared war on the Cathars. And so
genocided them, yes.
Well, there's a bunch of stuff going on here. And why is that going on? Is it a bunch of men trying to control a group of men? Well, yeah. How about some aliens working a petri dish and they have starter fluid? Or, there's something else going on here. What exactly would that be? Well, let's take a look at it from a broader scale. And if imagination is reality, I can imagine us originating on Mars and bringing a little starter fluid over here to Earth with Adam and Eve and his rib and, the Lilith and the rest of it. And all of a sudden I'm left with, gosh, I could write a really weird science fiction story about the origins of man. And guess what? We're now finding them in all kinds of Göbekli Tepe, those caves that go all the way from Scotland all the way down into Turkey. And what the heck's going on here? And I know I probably will never know. And that's because we're in some kind of larger Facebook prison. We're limited up to a certain point and we can't go outside because it's controlled. And when we talk about the distinction between free will and so on, the reason in magic, Crowley, and there's talked about true will, is that free will implies full disclosure.
And we don't have that.
No. And even if we did, we couldn't get there from here with our limitations in conceptualization. We're limited in many, many ways, and there are things like dogs have a smaller brain case, and yet that dog is closer to spirit. You know why? Because I feed it bacon. That's as good as it gets with Jack Nicholson telling the gay guy, how come my dog loves you more than me? Nicholson says, I feed it bacon. You're talking to the gut. The gut is the first brain in our body. And when you come from instinct, you do not, by definition, make mistakes. And that's where the distinction comes between intent and purpose. Intent is actually what happens because of wounding and owie, and I'm never going to date that kind of woman again. And stepping outside of that prison and witnessing yourself, watching yourself, and being able to... This will possibly be the most important thing I say tonight, Mike. This is a theorem in magic. Man has a responsibility for the thoughts he chooses to entertain. And that's why all your saints in history have stressed the importance of training the mind, meditation. All roads lead to Rome. But you need a North Star to know what direction you're going. Did that compute?
So what is the North Star if you want to train your mind metaphysically?
That's correct. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different North Star. And there are possibly as many religions as there are human beings. And the reason you select one over another is for fellowship, to reinforce a value or a belief system that you have that you'd like to get closer and closer toward. Now, I make a distinction between ethics and morals. I studied Hobbes and Kant and all of that when I was in college. And how did Ducky Mallard put it? Yeah, he said, an ethical man knows not to cheat on his wife. A moral man won't. It's walking your talk and finding your purpose here. And that's the distinction between intent and purpose. With purpose, an AI, for example, can't even see you because you're not in conflict with anything. And that's how you get around algorithms.
Well, that is the challenge that each of us faces in this world, is finding what is our purpose. Why am I here?
And you never get there because, as Simon says, you can go halfway to the door. That's what physics is. It gets you close, but by definition, you can't get there from here.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't actually achieve purpose. It's a process. Small steps, Allie.
Small steps. Halfway to the door again. Halfway to the door again. You never get to the door. You only get halfway.
Hey, listen. We've been invaded by something. I'm not kidding. I don't even think.
Let's talk about that. Like I said, give us your conclusions. How did you arrive at that conclusion? What have you seen that has given you the evidence around you? I mean, I don't look for references or anything, but what have you noticed? How did you reach that conclusion? What has been your thought process?
Well, I went to Groom Lake, level 8, and met Krill, and had an event. Here's the 7.5 foot creature that was talking inside my head. How does she do that? Oh yeah, it was feminine. How did she do that? It wasn't synthetic telepathy and microwave band, but one of the all those doors of when the door opened. What happened was where do I begin with this story? my back in the early 70s, we knew about aliens, but back then that was a space race. Sputnik, the moon, astronauts, you know, and so we were way more worried about what Russia was doing. And that was when Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain came out, and everybody was afraid. You know, they're doing Kalugina sitting there moving her hands and things that move on tables. She had magnets underneath. And Geller, I remember I busted Geller at Stanford, but he was real and could do things, but he couldn't do it at will. And when he started hanging around wealthy women, oh, bend my spoon, you know, break my watch. Well, he started cheating. And I caught him. And what it did is it decimated Puharich. Puharich was one of my teachers, and possibly, in my humble opinion, he wrote a book called Beyond Telepathy. I mean, that was one of my foundation books before I even did ESP. And that man was brilliant. And Bill Tiller, some others that were under him, were there for my studies. If I had a project I wanted to do on the West Coast, that's where we would do it, or at Argonne or JPL or China Lake. I did a lot of work at China Lake. Battelle up in Seattle, Boeing. There's something else going on, and even I can't conceptualize it completely. You understand? I'm limited as a scientist.
Okay, well, within the limitations that you have being in this human meat sack body we temporarily inhabit, what
something happened. My memory is gone. I can't get at it. It's like, you know, who played in Being There? And you know it's Peter Sellers, but you can't think of his name at that moment. You can kind of see the name and the guy, but you can't quite. Okay, I have a whole bunch of memories. Now I'm going to tell you what happened. Less than 5 months ago, over 40 years later, almost 40 years later, one of those doors opened for me. And the door that opened for me was that emotions are a higher form of language than words.
Well, they're more information. The emotions have more information density than thought does.
And why a lot of us have irregularities with our dreams and so on. What do you think a dream is? Like lucid dreaming has literally more physical content than consciousness does. What does that mean? Well, and that's my mentor, Stan Krippner, wrote Dream Telepathy, how to go into someone else's dream and change it. Motoyama took someone like you, put you inside a Faraday cage, and then had a famous psychic outside cause changes in your body at will. He would say, okay, now, and we could measure physiological changes in you inside a Faraday cage. How does that work? How does ESP work? You know, I mean, what is that? Intuition? Gut? Yeah, the gut is outside space-time. And your brain can be likened to a second gut dialoguing with subtle bodies outside the physical. If time isn't real, what does that make your sun? I mean, these are, you know, questions that you have to ask as a scientist, that there's something else going on here. And you realize, as a scientist, that I'm not going to be able to get there from here. And it's one of the reasons why I'm very careful now about what I think about. Because that's how you can be manipulated also, you know, through fear or power. What did Castaneda, the third enemy, was clarity. I'm currently enjoying the fourth enemy of man, old age. Too old to do anything about it.
I'm right behind you, so don't feel bad.
I know that song. Let's hum a few bars. You know, and yet, I'm 77. How do I look? Elixir vitae, that's what Ming said. Or Andy Warhol, he said, where are my weirgens when I need them? You know, Elixir vitae. I can tell you that most of everything is about your mind's eye, including your health. And if they say there's so many body count on this, you're going to believe it. That is what makes it true.
Mhm.
Not that it's real or not real. What's real is imagination, the mind's eye. And that's one of the reasons why I would simply say that children are probably our single most important natural resource. And why, in the current atmosphere that we have, you've got the brilliant little mini you. Why would you want to put them through educational processes that dumb them down to become you?
And breaks them down. It destroys their creativity. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And I'm blessed in that I'm still a little 4-year-old brat in a 77-year-old body. I'm lucky. I feel grateful, but I know I can't get there from here, even with mine. I can tell you this, though. If your child says there's a boogeyman under his bed, you better believe it. Okay, Mike, that pretty well sets up everything, doesn't it? Where do you want to go?
It does. That's a whole other discussion right there. Because as children, we've all dealt with that. And having a son, I've had to deal with that. And,
if that child sees a tomato plant growing in March, that child will never have fear of food again. And workbook 3 that I'm writing right now in the series of 5 workbooks for that, completing the holistic toward the evolution of consciousness series, is a old school bus that's down the street here. They retired it. It used to have the monarch butterfly, and it would go to first grade schools and teach the kids how the monarch butterfly migrates around. That nonsense. And what I've done is I've stripped the bus out and put a mobile water testing laboratory in it, and that's going to be run by 3rd graders, teaching 1st graders how to do turbidity and cleanliness of water. And Michael Moore has offered to take that bus across the country, and everywhere it stops, he's going to clone it. Because once you teach a child those kinds of skills, food and water will no longer become an issue like they would with you and me. And if you don't think something is about to happen, I can tell you that right now we're seeing Yellowstone as far as Ohio underground with tomography. The lava is as far as Ohio. And right now, Yellowstone is having a minimum of 100 earthquakes a day. And there have been just yesterday 7.8s off of Anawatu and da-da-do-do-do and yoop-de-do-do-do. That's because the moon is wobbling right now. And what that's doing is causing our poles to ring, boing, boing, and we may have electromagnetic pole shift, shortly. And if that happens, the whole West Coast gets terraformed. From I-5 West, it's gone. And that's that fault line with a volcano out of Crescent City, just off in the ocean there. We're guessing it'll be an 8.
The subduction zone up there, right?
Yeah. And nobody knows what's really going to happen. We're basically along for the ride. You could see that that's where they wipe the Petri dish and start with a new GMO. As a metaphor. I mean, who knows what's going on? I can envision all kinds of things because I wrote.
I look around. I look at the world that I live in, the things that I see. I see chemtrails in the sky almost every day. I see the ocean filled with plastic. I see microplastic everywhere that, it's in every food system, everywhere. It's all over the place. I see the GMO foods. I see the glyphosates. I see all these chemical things that are going on that are changing our environment and changing it radically. And I look at this and say, it appears to me that we're being terraformed by something, someone, somehow.
Well, that's a good way to look at it. That's one aspect. I went to Tibet through Nepal. That's where this hat came from, the concept of it. And I was documenting a Tibetan Buddhist technique of using these big, long horns, that they blow on canyons. And when they put 17 of them in a certain specific geometry, it so compressed the air that extremely large, heavy objects floated, and you could move them with a finger. Now, we don't have that technology. That's a technology that occurred in a previous epoch. And man gets to a certain level of achievement, like the Vermana and space flight, and they recycle us as a metaphor.
So who is this they?
Yeah, that's the question of the day.
Who is this they that recycle? But we see these reoccurring things with history. We look at the stories of Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, all these things. It appears that the planet and that civilization.
How about the fact that Mars, as a smaller planet, has more water on it than Earth does? How about what's the asteroid belt? Is that Mu? What is the planet?
Well, the asteroid belt used to be the planet that got blown up. That's where the asteroid belt came from. I knew that since I was 4 years old. I mean that is like I knew that since I was a young child. That was the only explanation for the asteroid belt. I knew that as a little kid before kindergarten. I knew that. Where did that knowledge come from in a 4-year-old kid?
There is more going on here, and people like myself are being kept on a short leash. I mean, literally.
Well, let me say something to you directly, because you and I have been friends for a long time. And, I know I have abilities that I cannot access. And I talk to friends of mine that I feel like, how you rent a U-Haul truck, it'll only do 66 miles an hour downhill with the gas floored. It's got a governor on that won't let it go any faster because it's a U-Haul
what your
truck.
governor is right now?
I feel like I have governors on me.
You said it, I can't, and you heard it. You are reinforcing your own belief system.
But the thing is, I've challenged these things. I've tried to break out of it to release these governors, and I've just been frustrated with my attempts. But I know I have abilities that I cannot currently access. I keep
Yes,
trying.
you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. In fact,
well,
I
have not found the key to that lock yet.
I'm going to give you a key right now. Hope is when you're dead stop, and why it's considered the last evil in Pandora's box. And when you know something, that's when you're moving forward. And that's your role for the day. It never say it, even if it's true. I can't do this. I'm uncertain. I've tried. Tried means you left a door open to fail.
Well, I've been trying and I've not quit yet. So let's just say that, and you're not done till you stop trying. So like I said, I have not solved this riddle yet.
Well, what they call that is the never endings.
Well, I do like your analogy here that hope is the last demon that was in Pandora's box. That's a good one. I like that perspective.
Yeah, it is. When you have hope, I hope that this will happen. What you're doing is placing that responsibility for something
on someone else, not yourself,
outside you, and that's Pandora. And why, they call it a hope chest. I tell you that when you know something. This was Nick Begich kicking my behind. I love him.
Well, let me just say this. I know I have abilities that I currently do not know how to access. Okay, I know it. I can feel them inside of me. I know they're there. I have not yet figured out how to access them.
So I wrote 3 books on that subject that are coming out this next year. The Diamond Body, Electromagic, and Yogatronics. And I'll give you a little copy on that. But Diamond Body is on cymatics. When I moved from the Manager Foundation out of Topeka, measuring Keith Milton Reinhardt and Jack Schwartz and some others. Jack Schwartz, up in Alethea, he could stick a needle through his arm, pull it out, and at will stop the bleeding. You don't think the military wanted to know how that one worked? Well, Okay, so when I moved from Topeka using biofeedback, I opened up a series using an old emo and a larger frame doing video feedback, and that's when we discovered cymatics. Cymatics are how video and sound alter biological processes. And that's the diamond body. Electromagic then took that study in 1979. Then I was able to duplicate any drug experience using electric currents directly on the top of the forehead using Mora and Endomet. And I then realized, oh, that means that taking a mushroom is not with changing placebo. The mushroom is a toxin,